Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. On this podcast, we explore the gritty realities of leadership and the challenges that come with it. I'm Kristin, and I'm joined by my extraordinary co-host, Ron Ward. Ron comes from the state where Brad Sigmund chose a firing squad, and this is the first time somebody was executed from by firing squad in 15 years. So South Carolina in the house.
Yeah, no kidding. I got to tell you, Kristin, after I found out they were going to execute someone by firing squad, I have really been on my best behavior.
He chose it, though, and not a bad decision.
You know, I was having dinner with some people. We were discussing that, and I agree. God forbid I'm ever, going to be executed. I would choose a firing squad because think about all the botched lethal injection stories. Oh, my God. And then an electric chair and the electricity and the burning.
No. Anyone that has seen the Green Mile, which I believe it's like the majority of the United States, I don't think anyone that's seen that wants to do the electric chair. Horrific.
Good point. If you're coming to South Carolina, watch your back. Okay, let's get on with it. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that's plagued many organizations, and it's bureaucracy. We're calling this Is Bureaucracy Ruining Your Business? And it happens all the time, and people seem to be aloof to it. So we're going to have some great stories. We always try to make things like this practical, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. You'll at least enjoy the stories.
Yeah.
According to HBR.org, bureaucracy has few fans. Don't you find it interesting, Kristin, that CEOs talk bad about bureaucracy while they're sitting in a web of bureaucracy?
Oh, yeah. Quite entertaining.
You sit on a throne of lies. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon calls it a villain, and Berkshire Hathaway Vice Chair Charlie Munger says its tentacles should be treated like the cancers they so much resemble. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JPMorgan Chase, agrees that bureaucracy is a disease. These leaders understand that bureaucracy saps initiative, inhibits risk-taking, and crushes creativity. It's a tax on human achievement. So that's why we wanted to take on this dirty word of bureaucracy.
And I will say a few of those CEOs that you mentioned have stood out in the media for going against the grain a little bit. Jamie Dimon, seen the Walmart CEO, Doug McMillon. They both have taken some stances that were not very popular. So I don't know. Everyone has bureaucracy, right, at that level. But I think the two of them might be working hard to nick some of it. But let's define bureaucracy. It's a system of administration that is characterized by excessive red tape. And I know, we were both talking about that offline. Red tape is something that a lot of people say instead of bureaucracy, but rigid rules, right? When you think of rigid rules, hierarchy, structures. Ron, I understand there is a relatable dirty lesson in your book. DL number 4, don't be afraid to question company policies or programs that are outdated or seem to serve no purpose. If it has no value, change it. And I understand that you just went to the DMV. I saw your post yesterday. It's like, I'm going to the DMV, pray for me, or prayers welcome or something. Want to talk about it with us? I'm curious.
Why would you take me through that terrible moment in life?
Yes, Steve.
Yes, and also in my book, it's probably the funniest story in the whole book. It's called Fly Swatter. It's called The Dead Guy in a Fly Swatter. And in the Appalachians, they would bring caskets home. And we'll, get the book and read it. It's a hilarious story. But over to the DMV, it delivered. It really delivered. I was there for 2 hours. Kristin knows I bought a little car, and I went there to get a title changed and to get license plates. And sure enough, I waited. Then when I finally get up there, they're asking me questions. I had my tax receipt to show that I paid taxes, sales tax on this thing. And she says, I don't see the vehicle number. I said, well, the receipt came from the Berkeley County tax office. And she goes, well, that just won't suffice. I'm going to need them to email me. So while she's doing other things, I'm on the phone with them because I've waited 2 hours. I told her, I said, I did get a little frustrated, Kristin. I said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to call them right now.
Yeah.
So I'm getting on the phone with them. That I did reach someone, which was a miracle, and they said they would email it over. Then she goes, do you want to transfer the tags? And I said, oh, I didn't know that was a possibility because the owner is a friend of mine, and she asked me to bring the tag back. Or she said, if they'll let you transfer it, I'm fine with it. Well, I don't do the DMV stuff that often, so I didn't know. So she goes, do you want to transfer it? And I said, that would be great. I'll just transfer it. No biggie. Yeah. And she looks down and she goes, you're not allowed to transfer a tag when you don't own the car. It can't be transferred. I swear to you, her tone changed. And it's like she completely forgot she asked me that question.
That is so weird.
It was so bizarre. And I'm already a little flustered. And I started to say something about, I just said, okay, that's fine. I will buy new tags. That's great. I was being sarcastic. Wow. I did the stuff I teach in coaching, my voice inflection high for sarcasm.
Yeah.
So anyway, but when you walk out of there, you're always so nervous. You wait so long that you don't have all of the documentation that you need.
Yeah.
I heard some people complaining next to me. This lady goes, I brought my birth certificate and I had a credit card, something. They said, you need another, piece of verification, validation with a picture. And she said, and then it hit me. I pulled out my operator's license, her driver's license. And she said, I'm surprised they accepted that, even though they issued it. It's pretty funny.
That sounds like a nightmare.
I'm taking a few breaths.
Did you take a nap afterwards?
Well, I wanted
Mentally
to, but
draining.
I had too much to do after being there for 2 hours.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. What a time suck. Oh goodness. Yeah. That's a perfect example. I mean, let's talk about how bureaucracy can rear its ugly head in organizations, especially as they grow and evolve. Now, there's a Harvard Business Review that I read up on, and it states that nearly 2/3 of respondents said their organizations had become more bureaucratic in recent years. I mean, that's insane. And we thought it was at an all-time high already. Let's also talk about renowned leadership consultant Peter Drucker. Am I saying that right?
Drucker. Yeah,
Drucker. Oh, I added an N in there.
He's not drunk.
Sorry, he's not a drunkard. His prediction that today's organizations would have half as many layers and 1/3 of managers as their late 1980s counterparts was way off the mark. And that's something that I think that a lot of federal workers are just now experiencing, is that flattening of layers. I experienced it a lot in banking, but I think that's somewhat new. You could talk to that a little bit more than I could, Ron.
Yeah, it's interesting that Peter Drucker was so renowned, and then he makes that prediction like the internet. All these things are going to just totally get rid of this bureaucracy, or at least minimize bureaucracy. And guess what, folks? Drum roll. Bureaucracy is thriving.
It really is. And, where's the balance, Ron?
Well, there definitely has to be a goal to balance it. The problem is these executives are in their cushy offices and they don't see the frustration on people's faces. And then other people are so busy, the line workers, they don't have time to try to report bureaucracy. So I think a lot of it is, Kristin, there's a lack of attention to it. And then you've got the hierarchy that you mentioned. No one knows who to talk to actually make changes. But fortunately, we are going to share with you a few companies in just a few minutes that have made some strides in minimizing bureaucracy. So just to finalize what I was talking about is a lot of times it's communication problems. A lot of times it's the way things are structured, the hierarchy, and some of it is just ignorance. People don't realize there's a better way to do it, or they don't collab with a similar company or look at how other people are doing things. And then it just keeps building. And this is your favorite, Kristin. Sometimes there's just a lack of trust. We're putting all of these policies and procedures in place so that you guys won't screw up and then the
Yeah.
policies and procedures actually, minimize creativity, as we've already said, and it bogs down the whole network.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. And that it brings me to something my husband had told me just recently that happened within the police bureau. And I'll be very vague here, but basically there was one bad actor and everybody got punished, right? So instead of, and I think this happens a lot more in the public sector than in the private sector, but instead of actually going to that one person and calling them out, they just put a blanket new policy that screws everybody over instead of addressing it properly with the bad actor. And that is maddening for folks. And I know I saw it a little bit in banking, not that often, but you just have to have the cojones to address it with the person or the people that are doing it in the first place. And that's that unnecessary red tape that is put in place.
Yeah, we
And,
saw it in politics. We see it in everything. It's an overcorrection.
Yes.
It's a knee-jerk reaction, and it happens all the time.
Yeah, it sure does. And talking about identifying bureaucratic structures in your organization. So we have a real life example from somebody, let's just call him Daniel. And this is him. So I'm going to be speaking as if I'm Daniel here. I was with my wife in a public office to get her a new passport 15 days after I booked the mandatory appointment. Then there was some sort of commotion at another counter. A couple was there trying to get a new passport for both the husband and wife, but had only booked an appointment for the husband with that online booking system that's mandatory. The system froze when the wife tried to book her appointment, and she could not complete the procedure. She had tried more times with the same result, so she gave up. Her frame of mind was, my husband has an official appointment. I can surely go there with him and get my new passport too, right? He says, wrong. Oh, I can like see this.
I can feel this one.
Right. Oh my gosh. Just common sense. You would think, hey, no big deal. So, but yeah, wrong. This is not the way bureaucracy thinks. The clerk at the counter refused to proceed without an official booking for the wife, and the woman refused to leave the premises without her new passport. Who knows? They're probably going on a trip or something. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
They were having a heated discussion and no one was backing down. I could relate to the woman's experience since the same had happened to me weeks before. I was not able to complete the booking online, so I had to go to the office to make a manual booking, but I live nearby, so it was a non-issue. When I left 25 minutes later, they were still in a deadlock about a procedure that takes 15 minutes to complete, right? So he's saying they were going at it for 25 minutes. The procedure itself takes 15. So this is a really good example here. And there seemed to be no solution at the horizon. I consider this a very good example of what happens when an organization does not put any decision power where it's needed the most, where employees meet the clients. The clerk could have simply made 2 passports with just a slight delay for the next customer and said she had no power to adjust the procedure and probably no incentive in doing so. She might have even received an official reprimand if she acted outside the approval process. And I can see this whole thing vividly.
Yeah, I can as well.
How maddening, but a great example from Daniel.
Yeah,
wow.
This really was a good example of bureaucracy. And a lot of times there's overly complex processes. Here's some other ways you can find out if you've got too much bureaucracy. This is my favorite: frequent meetings with little outcome. In other words, we meet once a week, whether we need to or not, or 3 times a week or whatever, and nothing really changes. And then employees start to feel, disengaged or frustrated. Of course, customers are upset, like the story that Kristin shared. And leaders need to conduct self-assessment of their organizational structure and culture. We've talked about a gap analysis and how important that is. We just don't give bureaucracy the attention that it needs. Now, here's some practical solutions. I mentioned before that there's some companies who have streamlined processes and it's paying off. Amazon actively implementing strategies like bureaucracy mailboxes. That's an online system they developed so that it empowers the day-to-day employees to report inefficiencies. Now, think about that, Kristin. In most cases, as I said previously, in a big mammoth organization, you don't even know who to talk to.
Right.
So you literally are given a green light. If you see somewhere where we could be more efficient, plug it in. Spotify utilizes a tribes and squads structure to maintain agility in a large organization. Tribes and squads is the way they break it down, their teams, and it's also designed to make things more efficient, and it's worked well for Spotify. And then Zappos is known for its flat hierarchy with minimal traditional management roles. That one we tried in the government one time. We went more flat line. They did 180 reviews and all that, and it didn't work so well. So I'm somewhere in the middle. I do believe you need a hierarchy, but you just have to be aware of places where you're bottlenecking or you're getting bogged down. And if you're aware of it, you can usually do something about it. So if people listen to us, if you're experiencing bureaucracy, encourage a culture of open communication and feedback. In other words, in meetings, say, is there any places where we're inefficient? Is there ways that we could streamline? Usually those frontline workers have the best ideas. I plug my favorite saying in here, Kristin, put aces in spaces. And Kristin finishes it by my other part, jacks and cracks.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got people who can help you streamline if you use them. So empower employees to make decisions at low levels. Foster innovation by allowing teams to experiment and take calculated risks. Bureaucracy does not take risks. It stifles risks.
It does.
And you should always collab with organizations that have successfully reduced bureaucracy and the positive outcomes they've experienced. Find out what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And that's why the show Undercover Boss was so impactful.
Oh, yes.
Wasn't that great? I would say, 9 out of 10 episodes, it was a very emotional experience for the CEO to actually get in there with the employees and experience. And it did seem like, they did like a look back 6 months down the road. It seemed like a lot of them had made long lasting decisions that had good impacts long term. And man, I wish that show was still around, but it really shows you how disconnected. I know you do the ladder thing in training where like the higher up the ladder you go, the more disconnected you are from the folks on the ground. And that is such a great visualization for what truly does happen. And so the fact that these companies have a means for the employees to sound the alarm on different things that are taking place, I think that's wonderful. I'd like to see if it's actually carried out. Are they looked through? How frequently are they looked through? Do they follow up with the submitter? I don't know, but
I agree.
Right?
So Kristin, to end with a very brief story, in 2005, we moved the Federal Probation and Pretrial Academy to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We had very few, even curriculum or anything. So what happened was, because the deputy director had made most of the decisions, when the academy came on the scene, instead of the academy director, which was called a division chief of safety and firearms, instead of her making decisions, she had to send everything to Washington. So she wasn't academy director that long until I took over. And I really started pushing stringently to get my boss to delegate responsibilities to me. And it was very difficult to get the approvals that I needed, but there were certain things that I could sign off on, and I'm not exaggerating, in 30 seconds, yet I would write it up, send it to her in DC, then wait, because she was very busy, wait on her. It might be 2 days before I would get it back to send out. And this happened over and over. So slowly through time, we were able to streamline some of that. A lot of it is empowering the people at the right level to make decisions, just like the story you told about the passport. I know we're being hard on the lady at the window, but who knows? She might have been vilified or actually underwent personnel action if she had stepped outside the lines. Who knows? So that's what bureaucracy does. It even instills fear that you're afraid to help someone.
Yeah. Well, I have to follow up on that, Ron. This is a story this was very tough for me at the bank. There was a whole play at one of the banks I worked at, and it was where the manager had to be in the lobby 70% of the day. It was called lobby leadership. So you have your highest paid bank employee standing in the lobby directing traffic. We had the joke like, oh, we're like the Walmart greeter, like an overpaid Walmart greeter, right? So you were greeting customers, figuring out if they needed a banker or a teller. It was a whole deal. So here I am out in the lobby, and at times I would have a long line waiting for a teller. And do you know how horrible that felt that I wasn't jumping in to help? Because I couldn't. You weren't allowed to be in a teller window as a manager. You weren't allowed to leave that lobby, right? At least you had to stay out there 70% of your day. And if you had corporate come in, you would get reamed out if you weren't in the lobby. So it was this wild feeling. And, I eventually, the more confident I got in my role, I kind of just was like, whatever. At that point, you can yell at me if you want to yell at me, but my customers are happy. So it took me a little bit to get the courage to just do what was right, not do what the company wanted me to do. So, and things ran a lot smoother, and my management, they started leaving me alone once they saw all the numbers were looking really good. But that just shows you the pressure that leaders in some businesses are under. And I also had a thing where I had to lead ATM migration. So I had to bring customers from my lobby out to my ATM to teach them how to use the ATM. And I had daily goals with ATM migration. How many people did you bring to the ATM versus using your tellers? When I knew the end result was going to be cutting my FTE, cutting my people. So it's wild, Kristin, what leadership goes through.
You may need to get some therapy. That seemed like a little emotional for you. Hey, I want to do a podcast service announcement. If you want to start a lobby leadership program, call Kristin Sokoloff. She will help you with your lobby leadership.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
I was a good little soldier for a while, and then I
that is a great example. People are going to follow Kristin's advice and get terminated because they
you have to just do what's right. You have to do what common sense, right? It's just like you can challenge the status quo respectfully.
Yeah, you really can. And ask any good leader, they do that. They have to operate beyond the boundaries sometimes in those gray areas. So, all right, everyone, I think this is a very interesting topic. If you know of anyone that works for a company that's filled with bureaucracy, or if you do, we would love to hear from you. Also recommend the podcast to those people. Maybe it will help a little bit. Maybe it will at least get them focused on this issue. Because people that are not streamlining their business, Kristin, they're going to get left behind. I can tell you that because there are some effective CEOs and entrepreneurs, solopreneurs. There's people who are getting it, and they're gonna just take off while the others are still spinning their wheels. So
exactly,
get it together, folks.
Yep, we need to do a deep dive study on the NYPD and how much red tape they have too. I could do an entire podcast episode on that, where they still write things in paper, on paper, and an arrest takes a full 24-hour cycle.
Yeah.
That'll be another episode, folks.
That sounds good. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Please download. Please tell people about the podcast. If you are watching on YouTube, like it, subscribe, although we want to reiterate that don't really help us toward our goals. So if you love to watch it on YouTube because of my good looks, that's fine. But then go on and put it on the pod. I was waiting on Kristin to chime in. I didn't even hear her.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Then go on and put it on your podcast anyway, because that helps us most.
Ron. Yeah, no, definitely. Double dip. Go watch it and then just go on and give us the number.
All right, everybody. Word of the day, lobby leadership.
Or ATM migration.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I just didn't know how to say that one. All right, everybody. Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.